Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our live stream for this week. We are continuing this very, very interesting journey. It's not a journey that is exclusively defined by our syllabus, by our particular conscious agendas, by our preconceptions about what needs to happen in these live streams. As you know, if you have heard my teaching before, or if you have practiced somatic meditation, you know that there are two things going on with us always. There is the conscious world of the ego, and that includes our personal immediate life. It includes, there's also an ego of relationships, an ego of families, ego of a country, ego of the world, social ego. And what that means is that there's a conventional mindset that all of us are tapped into, and it has many layers. But the thing about the mindset, which is the ego world, is that it resides in definition. It resides in concepts and labels and discriminations, and in the image, the mental image that we carry around about virtually everything. And there's also another reality altogether, and that's the reality that we begin to become acquainted with when we begin to put our awareness, our attention into our body, and we begin to see what we experience of the body from the inside. We could use the analogy of love. We have a lot of ideas about love, and we have a lot of ideas about relationship. And a lot of what we do in our loving relationships has to do with what we think, what we expect, what we assume. And yet, if we stay on that level, we've missed it. In any kind of intense relationship of friends, of lovers, of family members, and ideally of teachers and students, there's another process, and I would call it the flow of the life force. There's something that wants to happen, and it's going to break through the dikes of conceptual thinking, and it's going to assert itself. And when you feel a deep sense of connectedness that you can't explain, or when you feel the need to communicate in a way that makes you vulnerable and open and liable to be hurt, you're touching on that reality of love. Love is a process, it's a living force, and it wants us to grow. And that's very different from the conceptualized love. And it's the same way with our body. When we have the body that we think we have, that we've learned in school and we see in the mirror, and other people reflect to us about how it is with our body, that's not the real body, as we know. We begin to tap into the real body when we begin to do somatic meditation, and we begin to see, when we set aside what we think, what we actually feel and what we sense, and somatically what we know within ourselves. So that somatic reality is what is defining these podcasts, in the sense that, as I've discussed, and as many of you know from astrophysics, there's a consensus about the fact that reality while it appears locally, meaning in our immediate experience as humans, what we experience is not local. We are, whether we know it or not, at each moment experiencing the total web, the total framework of what is. So, in that sense, we are, in these podcasts that we're doing, I feel very strongly, based on many years of skeptical observation, I feel very strongly that all of us, all of you who are watching and listening tonight, are connected with me and with each other. And I'm looking into that connectedness for my guideline about where to go, what to talk about, how to practice with you. Trungpa Rinpoche once said to me, shortly before his death, we were standing in the back of a big room in a hotel in Bedford Springs, Pennsylvania, that we had rented for one of his 3-month seminaries. And for some reason, which I don't remember, he and I were standing in the back. He was in his wheelchair at that point, and I was standing next to him, and he was about to go in and give a talk. And what he said to me was, my discipline is not to think about what I'm going to talk about until my fanny hits the teaching cushion, and then I open my mind, and then I start teaching. And although at the time I didn't entirely understand what he was talking about, in retrospect, I realize now he was talking about taking what he did from the, you could say from the space, you could also say from the web of experience that through his practice, as through our somatic practice, that we're all able to tap into. So all this is a kind of a long way of saying why I find myself so compelled by doing these live streams with you, because I think we are all interconnected and touching in to a fundamental level of how things are, and we share it. We all feel it, and we're all tapped into it. And then what happens is that when I teach, I look to that, meaning I look into my body and I see what's there and what wants to emerge. So it's a very, very interesting process, and it's one we're all part of. One of my close students was watching a podcast a few weeks ago, and he said that he felt that the experience of being in that space and watching the podcast was in a certain way for him the same experience that he has sitting in Crestone in the shrine room doing a guided meditation or listening to a talk. Now, of course, in order to fully receive this underlying level of you could say transmission, if you want to, we have to be working on ourselves. There has to be a basic openness in our state of being. The deeper we are connected with our body, and the more we're able to, you could say, track the body, which means to feel and to know what's going on inside us and to stay with it, the more the fundamental transmission of reality, which is what the somatic lineage is all about, constantly transmitting how things are, the more that's going to be received and the more that's going to be seen and felt, and the more we'll be able to integrate it. But in a sense it doesn't, the deciding factor isn't going to be how much practice we've done in order for the basic message to land in your body. This whole issue that I'm talking about right now, which is that the information is there and the information is being received in our body of the teachings, the somatic teachings, when we hear them, when we see them, but that it makes a big difference how prepared our relative state of being is, which happens through practice. That point came through many years ago, and I want to tell you about it because it's very illustrative. In the course of his Vajrayana teaching, Trungpa Rinpoche did something called pointing out, which many of you know about, and I've talked about actually in these broadcasts. And pointing out is where the teacher creates a certain environment, a certain space. He asks the practitioners to hold their mind in a certain way. And then at a certain moment there's a gap in the ego process. There's a sudden fissure. There's a sudden opening. And in the pointing out experience, we suddenly see it. And I do it with you all the time in our practice. In the Vajrayana context, there are certain upayas or methods that are very strong and very forceful, and that they break open that veil. They rent the veil from top to bottom. And the potential is there for you to step through and be on the other side, the side of the great space of reality rather than on the side of the ego. And the interesting point is that sometimes there were people who were not very well prepared. And when Rinpoche gave those pointing out experiences, they didn't notice anything. And of course later things changed. Everybody has their own pacing. So it's not like there was any fundamental problem, but just in terms of their journey, at that time they weren't their state of being wasn't able to receive the experience. But on the other hand, if you have been practicing Vajrayana for quite some time, and maybe you had been to a number of Rinpoche's pointing out ceremonies, your state of being was prepared and also very, very relaxed. And as opposed to the first time when everybody's feeling very tense and tight and really sort of somewhat frozen, all of us. There was one particular time in, I think, 1983, when he gave the pointing out experience, and he used these forceful methods over and over and over and over. And what I felt, having been to 10 years of these ceremonies, so being relaxed about it, I felt that every time he did it, the space of my mind opened further and further and further and further and further and further. And finally there wasn't anything else but this infinitely profound and vast and open and bright field of awareness that was hard to describe, utterly empty, but at the same time so vivid and so clear and so experientially strong. It was actually very stunning. In the middle, we took a break, and he was in a very unusual space that night, because usually he didn't do that. In fact, I never saw him do it before that time or after. This repeated open kind of invitation. We took a break and I went into the kitchen, and the pots and pans were hanging up and they were gleaming, and all the highlights of light on all the stainless steel fixtures, the highlights were so brilliant and beautiful in their white blue color, and the stillness in the kitchen at that moment was absolute. And a friend of mine came up and said, "What happened? I didn't notice anything. I didn't see anything." And that was her, it was her first experience. And what I realized from that, for myself, was that what reality is and what we see or don't see is very up in the air. moment to moment to moment. Because there were other times when he would do that ceremony, and it didn't seem like that much to me. But this time was really different. So what happens when we go into the body, as we do in this lineage, and when we begin to tap into the interior experience, everything is open, everything is uncertain, and we are in a state of fundamental receptivity. And as we've talked about many times, when we're in that state of fundamental receptivity to our body, the journey that we need to make begins to show itself and begins to unfold in us. In the beginning, it's very, very interesting. People will do the somatic practices and they run into that kind of space. And, for all of us in the very beginning, it can be a little bit intimidating. Sometimes it's a little frightening, and we pull back right away. And, we revisit that space, when we do the practice, but it's not a place we really are very comfortable with. But as time goes on, through the practices, we actually become able to inhabit that beautiful, open, interior freedom that is the body's awareness. I've quoted the master Hongzhi, the 12th century Chan teacher, quite a few times. And he says basically, we need to constantly come into our body over and over and over and over. And we need to surrender over and over into the interior experience of the soma. And in that process, what we are doing is we are purifying our tendency to run away. We are curing it. We're healing these tendencies we have to run, to separate, to disconnect. We're brushing them away. We're grinding them down. And when we do this somatic practice over and over a period of time, this is what Hongzhi says, then we find that we're able to inhabit what he calls the clear circle of brightness of our own soma. And then from within that space, another beautiful phrase, which I probably quoted because I love it so much, we are, or our soma is, or the clear circle of brightness, is able to respond to every dust mote in the universe with absolute and perfect precision, but without becoming the partner of any of them. It's a very, very beautiful teaching, and it shows us in a way the tremendous importance of being within the soma for our life. It's only from within the soma that we can truly respond in an open and empty and precise and appropriate way to our world, to the people, to the experiences. So as a teacher, those of us who teach in Dharma Ocean, coming into the soma and residing in the clear circle of brightness, and then seeing what's in the environment, seeing what wants to be said, seeing what wants to be talked about, seeing what wants to be, what threads want to be followed, is the discipline. We could have a very complete outline. We could have a list of topics that we want to cover, which is helpful. And even after all these years, I do that myself, when I have things I want to cover. But then the soma basically offers the indication of how the journey is made. In a very similar way in our lives, it works exactly the same way. We have plans, we have agendas, we have things we need to do, we have people we need to see, we have children we need to relate to, we have garden that needs to be watered, we have shopping that we need to do. So it's not the things in our life that are in any way the problem, it's our attitude toward them. when we approach the things in our life from within the clear circle of brightness in our body, then somehow these situations, which may at times seem very claustrophobic and very demanding, and we may feel a lot of pressure, the soma feels no pressure at all. The soma only relates to one thing at a time, and the thing it relates to is this moment. And truly it's a timeless moment. So strangely enough, in meeting reality moment by moment by moment, there is a complete freedom, and in fact we're able to touch eternity in each situation, even picking up an orange from the fruit counter and putting it in our cart. So it's in the beginning it's a difficult concept that we could be living from within, somewhat from within our own unconscious, the unconscious being the body or being the soma. We could live from within the shadows where the ego really has no place and no particular role. And then the ego receives the information of the soma and puts it into action, and that's the ego's role. So in these podcasts, just to summarize, I feel we are all tapped into each other, and many people are emailing me and telling me they feel that way too. And the teachings that I give are coming from that space, from the space of our interconnected relationships with each other, wherever we may be, anywhere in the world. It's one of the startling possibilities that the internet has offered, that there may be a way to teach, there may be a way to give transmission, and there may be a way to communicate in the most intimate possible way across space and also across time for those of you who listen to this podcast later. It's very, very interesting, and I feel we really are making a voyage to the new world. And the new world is actually the old world, which wants to be rediscovered. So tonight, in our practice session, I want to pay special attention to what we could call the objective witness. As you know from previous podcasts, when we tap into the body, we are working with the empty, open, infinite space that is the ground of our somatic being, that we contact within the body, and we know it within the body. The gate is within the body, but then what we step through the gate into has no boundaries. That's the Dharmakaya aspect. And one thing about the Dharmakaya aspect is the unbiased, objective awareness that it represents, that it is. When we are making the journey of our human life, the Dharmakaya provides what we could call the unbiased reference point, the objective observer, the objective witness. There is a knowingness in the fundamental space and the fundamental and eternal awareness of our basic being. There's an awareness, a cognizance that sees everything exactly as it is. It's not impressed by anything, and it's not cowed by anything. It simply sees and receives and makes room for. So this dimension, as I've said very often, this dimension of the body, the most fundamental soma, the immeasurable expanse that we come to know in and through the body, is the ground of everything. It's the ground of the whole journey. When you have that, when you are connected with that basic witness, then all of the things that happen in life can be seen, can be received, can be experienced, can be made room for, can be understood. And that includes even the ups and downs of our ego. It includes the pain and confusion that we sometimes feel. From the viewpoint of the basic witness, everything is acceptable, everything is accepted, everything is seen, everything is understood intuitively, somatically, non-conceptually. This is so very, very important because the upwelling of our life in all of its manifestations, including the ego and our traumas, including our meltdowns, our neurotic upheavals, our states of activation, everything is part of the human journey. And the only, normally in human life, there's so much going on in us. There's so much cognitive dissonance, so much conflict, and so much confusion because we're always trying to make sense of things that really the ego cannot make sense of. There's no way to develop a coherent picture out of the totality of who we are and what we go through. And the only part of ourselves that can see the totality and see the purpose and the perfection of everything that we go through is the basic witness. And so we spend a tremendous amount of time in this lineage tapping in to the basic witness, learning how to connect with the basic space in our body and to become more familiar with it and to be able to go there when we need to, and then eventually be able to, as Songdra says, reside in the clear circle of brightness as our default for our human life. As we've discussed many times, one of the keynotes of Tantra is that of this tantric journey that we're on in somatic meditation, one of the keynotes is that every experience has a reason for arising, and everything that comes up, every sense perception, every thought, every upheaval, every inspiration, every moment of love, every moment of hate, every moment of confusion, each of these are part of the sacred totality of what is. They arise, and we need to make room for them because they have a journey. At that moment, they are sailing through the sky of our awareness, and they need to sail through that sky, and then they need to move on. Only the basic witness provides room for that. When we are invested from an ego standpoint in what's going on, then we short-circuit the journey of our experience. And we're either for or against pretty much everything that comes up. And then everything gets stuck, and we get stuck, and we become confused, and we become ill, mentally ill and physically ill, the more we try to hang on to this or that, or push this or that away. So cultivating the clear circle of brightness and learning how to be with it and eventually to be it is the whole beginning and end of the journey of the practicing lineage of somatic meditation. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to do what's called yin breathing, and I've done this with you before. And I would recommend, if you can lie down right now, that would be wonderful. Lie down on your back, in a comfortable way, pillow under your head, maybe strap around your knees, or your knees draped over a pillow to take pressure off your back, and then hands over the lower belly. If you want to sit up, which is what I'm going to do, that's fine. You can do it either way. And then going to begin, as we have done before, once again breathing into the lower belly, beginning by picking a point midway between the perineum and the navel. opening up the space a little bit, what we call the hara, or the lower dantian, which is just about halfway between the perineum and the navel, and maybe the shape of a duck's egg or a goose egg. And then just begin to feel yourself breathing into that space. And let your whole body relax around it. And breathe as slowly as you would like. If you would like to breathe very slowly, that's wonderful. And keeping your attention really in the lower belly. And feeling the tremendous subtlety and beauty of the breath as it enters the lower belly. And trying to relax, relax, relax into that breath as it comes into the lower belly. Just riding into the space in the lower belly on the in-breath. Relaxing into it and letting it dissolve in the lower belly. And feeling the whole body. Feel your whole body and notice if there's any place where you feel tension or tightness. And seeing if you can relax that into the lower belly. Soften it. And dissolve it on the in-breath into the lower belly. As you breathe, folding everything that's going on into your lower belly, into that space, and dissolving it. And then paying special attention to the point that you're breathing into, and see if you can feel the coolness of the breath on the in-breath. And use that as your anchor in the lower belly. And then beginning to open up the space around that point. Opening, opening. So there's a sense of the walls of that space going out and out and out on each breath, on each in-breath. You're opening and you're letting go. Letting the walls fall out and away. And then letting yourself be right in the middle as you do this. As you do this, you may notice a moment of disorientation. There's a moment when suddenly you don't know where you are. That's what we're looking for. It's a moment of utter space, of utter something. Look for it in your lower belly. Opening out, staying in the middle, but letting the walls move out on each breath. On each breath, it's as if you're starting from that point in the center of the lower belly you're breathing into, and you're opening all the way out in every direction, and looking at the space that's left in the lower belly. And then opening that out. You may notice the space doesn't feel stable. It may be very open, but it's something that's almost quaking about it. That's the energy of the space. The space is empty, but that emptiness is quaking. That's the fundamental life force brewing in the space of, or as the space of utter emptiness. Utter emptiness inherently gives birth always to the brewing of the life force, and it feels like quaking. So stay with it. Keep breathing into the lower belly. And let go, let go, let go. From the inside out. Right now, we're making a relationship with the objective witness, with the basic, impartial awareness of our soma. We're putting our toe into the clear circle of brightness, which is our basic nature of our incarnation, of our body, of our human life, the clear circle of brightness. Hongzhi says, when we reside in the clear circle of brightness, there's room for everything in our life. There's space around everything. There's no more colliding of experience. There's no more conflict. Everything resides in its own place. Everything exhibits its own purpose and beauty and significance. Each human face is a revelation. Each human situation is a sacred event in the cosmos. Our mind, our acceptance, and our love is boundless for what is. Therefore, Hongzhi says, do the work so that you can inhabit the clear circle of brightness. So breathing into the lower belly, opening the space and letting go and just being there. And being, and being, and being, just being. So the yin breathing, or lower belly, gentle, very, very gentle lower belly breathing, is a very beautiful practice, and for many of us it's our favorite practice, because in the most simple and direct way possible it cultivates the experience of the clear circle of brightness. You can do this as your main practice. You can do 40-minute sessions, and you can do it at night if you wake up. It's called the panacea that heals all ills, so to speak. Very good. So now I'm going to invite Elizabeth to come join me, and we will see what's up, what kinds of things that you're sending our way. And I do want to encourage you to send in questions. Sometimes, we don't have that many questions, and we have room for more. So send them in either before the live stream or during the live stream. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, Reggie. So our first question is from Gail in Lockhart, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
When channeling the energy up the central channel, I repeat one of the mantras I'm working on from the 21 aspects of Tara. In other words, I'm combining two practices into one. The Tara practice includes working with the channels. I wonder if you have anything to say about doing the practice in this way.
Well, my concern is with the term channeling the energy, and that's actually not what I teach. The minute we get into manipulating the energy in our body, manipulating it, which means trying to push the energy in a certain direction, then the ego is in control. At very, very advanced levels of practice, we do it, but generally it's not. That's not what I teach. What I teach is you're simply tapping into the central channel, and you are noticing the energy of awareness. It's not really energy in any solid sense. You're noticing the energy of awareness and how there is a rising tendency in it on its own. And of course I don't know, the background, so it's difficult to be very precise. But my only concern with Vajrayana practice in general is that we latch on to techniques or visualizations or mantras as a way to try to accomplish something for ourselves. And it's not that what we're trying to accomplish is a bad thing, but the minute we do that, it's not the soma, basically, who's guiding the journey. It's the ego and the ego's ideas of what practice is and should be. It's more of a left brain version. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Particularly I'm not saying that, we should do it. If somebody's given you that instruction of the, you do mantras and you channel the energy, that's that person's instruction. But I'd like to suggest that there's a more profound way of handling Vajrayana practice, and that is really to view it as tapping into something that's already going on and not feeling that we have to intervene or direct or guide or channel or do anything at all with it. We're simply tapping into a very natural process of life.
Ruvain in Colorado asks, why does it seem so much easier to meditate in the presence of great masters?
Because they're more human than we are. And the whole term great master is, of course, it's used in our culture, but it's a misnomer. The most realized people that I have known are the people who don't see themselves as great and don't see themselves as a master, but rather are able to inhabit their own humanity in a way that is undefended, open, vulnerable, and entirely present. And we are able to meditate much more easily in the presence of such a person. It's true. And I think it's because when we have someone who has practiced deeply in their life, when they sit down to meditate, their heart develops what's called a coherence. There's a coherence to the rhythms and the energy and the electromagnetic field, which can be measured. And that if that person is sitting at the front of the room, and there are people in the room, when we talk about heart coherence, we also talk about incoherence, which is when the heart rhythms are not the rhythms of the beating of the heart, but the electromagnetic energy is incoherent, and that also can be measured. And what happens when a person with a high level of coherence sits with a person or people or a whole room full of people whose heart rhythms are not at that level of coherence? Strangely enough, the most coherent heart energy in the room entrains with all the other hearts. All of us entrain with that master. And our hearts also come into that same coherence. And we experience, when our heart energy, the electromagnetic field in our heart is deeply coherent, there's a sense of the natural state. I mean, that's what I'm talking about, is a sort of electromagnetic language to talk about resting in the true nature, resting in the immeasurable expanse. I was talking with a friend of mine very recently, actually just last few days, who knew Trungpa Rinpoche very, very well, Frank Berliner. You may know him. He's a very good teacher. He teaches for Dharma Ocean, and he's a wonderful teacher. He teaches programs for us, and he does other teaching. And he was reminding me that when any of us would go in and sit with Trungpa Rinpoche, young hippies as we were, our minds would also fall into this empty, open state that was, it was shocking because it was something that many of us had never experienced before in our lives. And you were there. It wasn't that you were picking, sort of kind of feeding off him. Your heart went into that very same kind of coherence. And you were there sitting with him. And the moment, truly, I remember so many minutes sitting with him, so many moments when it felt like there was all the space in the universe for simply sitting and being. And, one time at Lake Louise, Canada, where we had a program, I was sitting with him in the top floor in his sitting room, and the window was open, and out across the lake there were these incredibly beautiful mountains. It was so peaceful, and the wind was gently blowing the curtains, and he was simply sitting and being, and I found myself falling into that exact same state of mind. And that, a really good teacher is going to use that as inspiration for you, and is going to encourage you to make your own journey so that you also can sit and be in that exact same way that he or she is. So it's very beautiful, this ability of humans to entrain with one another, which is the term we use for this mutual coming into coherence. I think it was originally developed with mothers and small babies, that they entrain with one another. But now we see that it's actually present throughout all of life. And it's particularly helpful to understand this point, which is a good one, that when we sit down with a realized person, our minds actually go into that very same space. I think the challenge is for us to make the journey ourselves, so that we're not dependent on our teachers to feel that way. Most of us in this life perhaps will not make that journey, and for them and for us, those of us who are in that situation, then being, with a teacher is going to be the way we do it, and there's nothing wrong with that. At the same time, we have to realize that that very same journey is there for us to make if we want to. And we can indeed, through the, especially the methods of the Vajrayana, which are based on the body, we can indeed arrive in a place where all of a sudden what we found in the teacher, that's our state of being. And then of course we can entrain with others and help them move on their journey in the very same way, inspire them in that way. So Ruvain, thank you. That was a good question.
This is from a man named Phil, and he self-describes himself as a worrywart.
Worrywart?
That's how he signed his name. So, I feel drawn to this path of somatic meditation, but I believe our bodies are very fragile. I recognize that the odds of becoming paralyzed or maimed are low, but I wonder if placing too much reliance on my body as a source of insight and awakening might place me at risk for spiritual devastation if, for example, I would lose somatic awareness in areas that became paralyzed. At one point I heard you mention that Trungpa Rinpoche became partially paralyzed later in life. Did he offer any insights into practicing somatic meditation with such an obstacle? Are my fears unfounded?
Well, if you don't, you've got two choices really. You've got practicing spirituality through your thinking mind, your left brain, and the other one is practicing spirituality by connecting with your experience. And experience happens in the body. Experience doesn't happen anywhere else. You only have two choices. And the thing about meditation, when it is not based on the body, is it's not really experiential. It's more mental. And we may have experiences. We may have a lot of things happen that seem to be realization. But the thing is, the thinking mind cannot experience anything directly. The thinking mind is processing what the body experiences. So what happens, when we look at it from that viewpoint, there are not a lot of choices here. The only, to me, meditation that is not deeply experiential is not going to be transformative. And we're looking for transformation. So I think the body is about the only choice we have. If we're interested in the experience, the direct, full human experience of what the Buddha is talking about, and if we're interested in the kind of transformation that meditation offers, we kind of have to work with our body. And there is, I think, possibly an additional thing I could say here, which is the body that we think we have, the physical body, is actually only the manifestation of something more fundamental and something that is cannot be damaged. And that's what's called the energetic body. It's the Dharmakaya and the Sambhogakaya. In other words, within our physical body, there is a deeper experience of the body that is not physical and is not dependent. It's not dependent on age. It's not dependent on health. It's not dependent on injury. It's not dependent on having an amputation. That inner experience of the body is always whole. We read about this in Christianity, in the beautiful teachings of the resurrection of the body. What they're talking about is that there is this inner form that's timeless, it's ageless, that represents it's the expression of our, what they call soul, which I would call our most profound individuality as an event in the universe. And those teachings remind us that the resurrection of the body doesn't depend on, in this life, having a body that's whole. Because the fact is, almost none of us have a body that's whole. Almost all of us have a body that's somehow compromised. Strangely enough, when we have a serious disease or we have a serious injury, that's the time we truly connect with the inner openness and perfection and freedom of the body. It's a very strange thing. So I think that there's no need for worry here, but I think there is a need for a lot of somatic practice so that what I'm talking about isn't just, it's not just theory, but it becomes a matter of your own direct experience. As the Buddha said, only when you experience something directly for yourself do you know whether it's true or false. And I would suggest that's the place to look, ultimately look to for the answers of your question.
Jason asks, I find a close similarity between the tender ache found at the heart center when contemplated through pure awareness and the hot, agitated tension I feel there in connection to social anxiety. But they have an opposite effect. One opens outward to other people and the other is constraining. What is the relationship and how can I work with it?
Well, the first one, I agree that, when we tap into the empty open awareness of our body, there is, as we've talked a little bit about here, there's a very natural feeling of tenderness, soreness, sadness. It's very much what in the African American culture is called soul. We feel the soul, we feel the utter humanity and the warmth and the sadness of our heart. In social interactions, for many of us, if not for all of us, we get activated, and meaning that we feel vulnerable and we feel at risk. We feel we could be hurt. We feel that the world is not a safe place, and that kind of a situation, which is very common, if not universal, among humans, leads to the upflow or the increase of our stress hormones, especially cortisol and adrenaline and norepinephrine. And when that happens, you begin to feel this tight feeling in your chest, and you lose touch with the tenderness that's underneath. What's happened here is the tenderness that's underneath is associated with the parasympathetic nervous system. And when we feel threatened and our stress hormones kick in, then all of a sudden we're thrown into the fight or flight syndrome of the sympathetic nervous system. At that point, we're actually out of touch with our body. So this is, I'm personally very, very familiar with this pattern, and what I do is, we need to downregulate. What's happened here is we've upregulated into the danger zone of what's called hyperarousal of, the sympathetic nervous system. We're under stress. And the stress, there may not be any objective fear, once again, but it doesn't matter. What's happening here is that because of our early experiences and the attachment disorders that we all have as humans, there's nobody that escapes that, we freak out in certain kinds of social situations, and we're thrown into a state of disconnection from our body, into the sympathetic nervous system and all of the stress hormone activation that comes with it. So what I do is I downregulate. I basically, it's interesting that he's asking this question now, because what I do is I do yin breathing. That's really the best thing. And you'd be quite amazed how quickly, when you do yin breathing, you can downregulate and come back to yourself. It might take a while. It might take 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but you can come back. I've been, once again, reading for the second time a wonderful book by Vander called The Body Knows the Score, and he talks about this very thing in working with trauma, that the first step, when you're activated, when you're in the sympathetic nervous system, the first step is to notice that you're there. And the second step is to do the kind of practice that I'm talking about, which is you begin to pay attention to your breathing and to your body and downregulate. And the third step is you actually feel what you're feeling. And that is how, strangely enough, that is how trauma is released, even with people who are fairly seriously traumatized. when we do that, when we take those steps, number one, realize you're activated and you've lost touch with the tender, open heart. Number two, you begin to work with the breath, work with the somatic body work to bring yourself down, bring yourself back, and down-regulate yourself. And number three, you begin to really feel what's going on in your body and really pay attention to it. You find that those feelings are clues. Those feelings, and again, he mentions this, that, the parallel between trauma work and what we do in somatic meditation is really unbelievably exact and precise. What happens next is, he says, you may begin to see images or have memories, or you may visualize yourself killing somebody or running away from a situation. This is all the wisdom of the body that is providing you with a way to work through the feelings that, these feelings which are so deeply rooted in the past. It's a very good thing. Peter Levine says the same thing in Waking the Tiger in his other work. So, it's very good work, and the stress we feel in social situations is just, it's a kind of feedback mechanism that it's a mirror for us, and it shows us that we do have some unresolved issues, running back into our ancient past that we can indeed work with, and we can resolve, through the somatic practices.
When I read this question, I also thought about your teachings about practice where you're in the central channel and then you extend into the mid-body and the heart and feel all that's going on there. And I felt like his question, I don't know if that would be helpful for him or not. But
yeah, why don't you say a little bit more about how that works? Elizabeth's talking about a very specific practice we do called somatic descent. Do you want to just describe briefly how it goes?
I'll do my best.
Yeah, I mean, we're not doing a guided meditation, but you can just explain so people see. That'd be good, yeah.
My understanding of the practice, or at least the way I'm describing it in relation to this question, is relating, opening into the basic, simple space of the central channel and the openness that's there, and specifically with this question behind the heart space. And then once that's really present, then you extend into what we call the mid-body. And within that space, you feel a lot going on. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of experience. There's a lot of imagery sometimes, or symbolism that comes. And you're extending into that from that open space and just really taking in information that's being communicated. And in a non-conceptual way as much as you can, really staying in your body, staying in your central channel. But this place he's exploring between the open expansiveness he feels and then the constriction, and they're both in relationship to other people.
Yeah.
He might find a lot in that practice.
Yeah, that's great. That's wonderful. Isn't that available on the website? Is it?
Yeah, it is.
Where is it? Do you know? Does anyone know?
I think it's got its own label, and it's called, my mind's blanking in the moment. Under the Learn to Meditate section, I do believe it's there.
Somatic descent is there.
The somatic descent practice.
Yeah. Oh, great. Okay, thanks. Yeah, you could give that a try. Wonderful. Thanks.
This is from Stein in Denmark, and he's currently in a solitary retreat.
Yes.
The first question is, I have had tinnitus, a constant noise in my head, for over 20 years. In this retreat, it was very loud and calling my attention. When I started looking for it, I couldn't find it anywhere, not outside or inside. Other than watching the process, do you have any suggestions for what to do with it?
I pay a lot of attention to it. I've had that too, myself. And Trungpa Rinpoche, of course, never really gave you anything to hang on to. But when I reported it after my first retreat, I'd recently gotten rabies shots to go to India. And in the retreat, I came to the conclusion that I had rabies. So this is just like where we can go, right? And so I called up, I ran down the hill. It was in January in Vermont in my pajamas. I ran all the way down the hill. I called Trungpa Rinpoche, or maybe the next day, I don't remember. And he said, don't worry, it's fine, it's normal. That's all he said. But what I've come to think over time is there's a certain teaching about the roar of shunyata. And I would look into that. This is energy that is being produced by basic space. And it comes up as something that we hear. But as he says, you can't really find it. On the other hand, it's going on. So you might look into that in your retreat and see what you find out. Enter into it fully and just look at the energy and how it's arising out of empty space. And I'd love to have you report back in a while what you found out.
His second question: when I meditate, whether it is bodywork, shikantaza, form, or formless meditation, I can't stop guiding myself, as if I was listening to one of your guided meditations. Maybe I can let go for 2 seconds, and then the voice comes back and says something like, let go completely.
Mm-hmm.
Is it really a problem, or should I continue in this way?
My guess would be you probably don't have that much choice right now. But what I would do is, just let your process unfold and stay with it and don't resist it. And as Tartang Tulku says very beautifully, if you give your mind enough space, and that includes your thinking mind, and we're not talking about investing in the thoughts you're having, but just let your mind go, the mind will find its own way home. In the meantime, while this is all going on, I would be looking at the space behind the mind and see what's going on there, and see if there aren't times in this thinking process of guiding yourself when there is that very same kind of sudden opening I talked about when I was teaching you yin breathing. You might check into it and see.
Greg in Seattle, Washington. I took note of your caution a couple weeks ago about not directing energy in the central channel with one's mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do Qigong, including the microcosmic orbit, I'm wondering if you could help make distinct the differences between these two meditation practices.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, tongue placement, the use of attention or directing the mind, and also where attention is placed on different sides of the spine. It seems these two techniques should not be mixed.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I'm wondering if standing meditation is a valid posture to use during meditation on the central channel.
Mm-hmm. In Qigong, in the microcosmic orbit, I wouldn't say we're directing the energy in the microcosmic orbit, which is it's a circular motion from the perineum up the spine and then down the front. I would say more that we are using a visualization to tap into a flow of energy that's already going on. So I would actually answer that the same way I did with the former question about directing the energy, channeling the energy up the spine. When we have too much emphasis on technique, as if we're actually accomplishing something, then it's not going to do the job. So I think with all of these visualizations in Vajrayana, we have to regard them as a kind of stepping stone to something that's much more fundamental, much more organic, and much more spontaneous that's going on in the body, such as the microcosmic orbit, which is going on all the time. We just need to tap into it, or the movement up the central channel, which is half of the microcosmic orbit, and that's going on all the time also. And what was the very last thing? Standing up. Yeah, I mean, standing. The Buddha said there are four postures for meditation: standing, sitting, lying down, and walking. And all four of those are ways to practice. And particularly in Qigong, the standing one is very, very interesting and very productive. I think. Buddhism didn't, it just didn't really pick up on the movement part of, in Tantra they did have it actually in tantric dancing that we know was very much part of the tradition in India. And it survived in Tibet in a much more, I would say, with all due respect, a much more formalized and somewhat rigid format with Lama dancing. In India, though, if you go to East India, to Orissa, you'll see a form of dancing there that actually goes back to tantric times. It's incredibly fluid and beautiful and open. It's done by the Devadasis, who are the temple dancers in the temples of Orissa on the Bay of Bengal. But generally Buddhism doesn't do that, and it's really lost something, and I think Qigong and Tai Chi and some of the other contemplative capoeira is Brazilian, right?
Mm-hmm.
That also has elements of awareness practice that are very beneficial and very interesting. So I would, encourage him to explore this. Yeah, it's good. Maybe one more?
Mm-hmm. This is from Jane in
Mm-hmm.
Delaware. I am new to meditation. So
Mm-hmm.
many things come up for me in these talks and guided meditations, all fear-based. I am very suspicious of genuine emotion. I would like to know more about your teachings on fear, ego, emotions, and the second veil. And can you recommend a book, CD, or podcast to help me understand these issues on the journey I am beginning? There are so many resources on the Dharma Ocean website.
Mm-hmm. In the beginning, a lot of things happen. We have a lot of glimpses, and we have a lot of startle responses, I think, to finding out what our body really feels like. And, we have fear, we have excitement, we have apprehension, we have anxiety. We have a whole range of experiences. We may feel that these are a response to the practices, but actually they're not. What they are is that, as I was saying about the basic witness, the more we come into our body, the more we begin to become aware of what's actually going on with us. And what's going on with us is probably all of the things she mentions and other things in addition. I think the first step in the journey is not to make too much out of those, but simply, go through the body work. And I would recommend the 20 CD set, Your Breathing Body, as a way of grounding yourself in your body. And I wouldn't worry too much about the emotional ups and downs that go along with it. I think that the more you connect with your body, even though those responses will be there for a while, they won't be a big deal, because you'll be connecting with something that feels much more secure, much more safe, and much more solid, which is the space in your body and the space in the earth. So I would get that, I'd get a hold of that CD series. I think you can either buy it as CDs, from Sounds True, or you can download it from the internet, from Sounds True, or, you can get it from Amazon. And just go through those 20 and, take a week or two for each CD. So we're talking about 20 to 40 weeks. And really go through the training step by step. That what I have to offer fundamentally is not teachings. It's actually practices, and it's a path of training. That's really what, the important thing. So she could give that a try and, see if that helps. One thing I forgot to mention to you, there are a couple programs that just came out. One of them is called Meditation in 7 Steps, which is a very simple guide to sitting meditation. It's from Sounds True. We recorded it, 8 months ago. And it's, is it only 2 CDs? I think it's only 2 CDs. Yeah, I think so. And another one that is out, just came out, is called the somatic, what is it called? The Somatic Practice of Pure Awareness, which is the shikantaza. It's a very detailed development of the posture of pure awareness, which we've been talking about in this podcast, and that's 9 CDs. And then, so that's also available now from Amazon. And then the last one, and this is all for your training. I'm doing this because I've done these programs because I realize that most people, we're contacting maybe around 70 countries with these live streams, and I'm beginning to realize that most of you I won't ever meet in the flesh. And over the last few years, I've been doing more of these recordings because, as I've been saying, I really feel the journey can be made wherever you are, but I need to provide the resources. So that's out. Those 2 programs are out. And then there's another one that we also recorded in the spring, which is on Elizabeth's practice Elizabeth mentioned, which is called Somatic Descent. And that one you can pre-order from Amazon. So I'm just sending a lot of resources your way, and to help you make as much of this journey as you want to, as you feel inspired to. If you are interested in how these unfold in a sequential way, because they do, the body work, meditating with the body, working with the body is step one, and then the shikantaza is step two, and then we learn somatic descent in order to read the body. That whole sequence of the developmental sequence of our own spiritual growth, which I feel quite certain is encoded in our genome, in our human genetic system. It's encoded there. Those stages, the way we practice them at Dharma Ocean, are outlined on the website. If you go to the bottom of the home page, it says something like "The Training and the Journey." Is that the title, Jonathan?
Yes.
Or "The Training and the Path," maybe? Training in the Path. Yeah, I mean, that will give you a sense of the overview of the whole thing, which is really helpful if you're doing this. That way, you can see how what's going on at each stage of our development, and it will help you relax and realize that you're being held in a very safe and container, and one that's in alignment with your own inner developmental model, the one that's already in your body, in your genetic system, and in the stages of your spiritual unfolding. Very good. Well, maybe we could stop at that point, and I'd like to thank everybody for being here, and we'll close with the Dharma Ocean bow, which is the heart, what we call the heart bow.